As 2024 drew to a close, I found myself facing a bit of a conundrum. After earning the platinum for Alien Isolation and wrapping up a few other videos, I wasn't in the mood to dive into another big project. With family visiting for the holidays and other commitments piling up, this made the idea of tackling something big feel overwhelming. Still, I had the itch to platinum a few more games before the year ended, though I wanted them to be more laid-back experiences. That's when inspiration struck to do something I haven't done in years. This was the perfect time to revisit my trophy list and tackle some games I was tantalizingly close to platinuming. I had always toyed with this idea before, but never actually followed through. Now, it felt like the right moment. I went through my trophy list, narrowing it down to games where at least 50% of the trophies were collected. The list grew longer than I anticipated, so I focused on games that meet two criteria. A, they had to intrigue me enough to dive back in, and B, they weren't ones I planned to make videos on in the future, either as standalone projects or part of a series. While I started with more than 10 games on my list, by the time the year ended, I'd earned the platinum for 6 of them, with a couple of bonus games I'll touch on later. Before diving in though, since we'll be talking about the endings for most of these games, I want to throw out a quick spoiler warning for the following games featured in the video. With the formalities out of the way, the first game to platinum was Detroit Become Human. I remember being excited to play this back in 2018 after seeing it showcased at various PlayStation and E3 events. While I was familiar with the developer Quantic Dream from Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls, this was my first time playing one of their games. Not only was it a standout experience with visuals that remain stunning even today, but it also became a cherished memory for me. My sister, who was just starting to take an interest in gaming, would watch me play and even help choose some of the choices. It was a game we bonded over, and because of that, it's an experience I'll never forget. When it came to trophies, I unlocked most of them during my first playthrough, collecting 31 out of 49 in 2018. Going back in, I had a somewhat loose plan, but found myself relying on PSN profiles, YouTube, and Reddit to clean things up. My focus was on wrapping up a pacifist playthrough, with trophies centering around Marcus. Since most of them were chapter specific, I dove straight into his storyline. The first stop was early in the game when Marcus returned from a party with Carl, the elderly artist he cares for. In a critical scene, Carl's son, Leo, breaks into the house, and we're faced with a major decision: attack Leo or defend ourselves. For the pacifist route, I let Leo win the fight, earning my first trophy after more than 6 years. Next, I jumped to the Stratford Tower chapter, where Marcus and his team broadcast a message to humans and androids alike. During my original playthrough, I had triggered some alarms and suffered a casualty by letting this man escape. I shot him this time, allowing me to complete the mission without raising alarms or losing anyone. Another pivotal chapter was the Freedom March. The first time around, I fled when confronted by the police. However, for the pacifist trophy, I chose to stand my ground. The final piece of the pacifist puzzle was ensuring that everyone survived until the end of the game. This included not just the main characters, but also key side characters like Alice, Luther, Hank, Simon, North, Josh, and Jerry. Simon was the only one who died in my original playthrough, which meant replaying several chapters to keep him alive, along with everyone else of course. Using the flowchart to track my previous choices, I retraced my steps, ensuring I made the necessary pacifist choices. One of the trickiest parts was keeping Kara, Alice, and Luther alive during their escape to Canada in the final chapter. Arriving at a bus station, I initially returned a lost bus ticket to its owner, putting us on a dangerous path to cross the border in a boat. No matter what choices I made, someone would end up dying. After doing some research, I read that someone dies no matter what, meaning I would have to go back quite a bit in the chapter to steal the bus ticket instead. This decision led the group to the border where they were able to get across safely. With everyone alive, this successfully ended my pacifist playthrough. By the end of this playthrough, I had enough bonus points to unlock concept art, character models, and soundtracks from the extras menu. You earn a steady number of points for making decisions throughout the game, and I just had to spend 20,000 for another trophy. For my second playthrough, I took a violent approach. Typically, I avoid being a dick on my first run of a choice-driven game, but this time, I was genuinely excited to see a darker side of the story. The staggering number of choices in Detroit kept the experience fresh, even years after my initial playthrough. There were a few trophies I kept in mind, one of which involved collectibles. Scattered throughout the game are 46 magazines to read, and I had already found about half of them. Using a guide from PS5 Trophies, I set out to collect the rest, only to realize this wasn't going to be as straightforward as it seemed. There are a handful of magazines that would only appear based on certain choices. For instance, if Kara and Alice avoid the police during the Fugitives chapter, a magazine tied to that won't show up until Zlatko, which happens 7 chapters later. Looking out for these choices was slightly annoying and often clashed with the violent playthrough, so I saved those magazines for last, focusing instead on the ones I could gather naturally. The next trophy I had to focus on was I'll Be Back, where Connor needed to die in return at every opportunity before reaching the end. While this sounded daunting at first, it wasn't as difficult as I thought. Stressful? Sure. But again, following a guide kept me on track. To streamline the process for my violent playthrough, I decided to eliminate Kara and Alice early on. They didn't have many trophies tied to their chapters that I hadn't already unlocked, and this would speed things up significantly. My first trophy for this run came during the Eden Club chapter.
Connor, the fuck are you doing?
Coming, Lieutenant.
Where I killed the 2 Tracys at the end. As I was guiding Connor down a machine-focused path, his relationship with Hank was becoming hostile. Hank eventually snapped, killing Connor in the middle of a park. Returning to Stratford Tower, Simon was injured before I could relay my message, and we left him behind on the roof. In the next chapter, a new Connor model investigates the scene alongside Hank. Simon, still hiding on the roof, attacks us and connecting with him reveals Jericho's location. While this moment was gut-wrenching to watch, it clashed with the I'll Be Back trophy, so I replayed the chapter to get this model of Connor killed instead. Oh, fun fact, every time Connor dies, this number on his suit changes. It's a neat detail that helped me keep track of my progress. Additionally, you can view Connor's graves during your visits to Amanda, which happen often. Marcus also had a few violent trophies as well. During the Capitol Park chapter, I conducted a violent riot, and in Freedom March, I chose to attack the police. This is where I let Marcus die to shift the focus entirely to Connor. Interestingly, North, Marcus's closest ally and potential love interest, takes over as the leader of the Deviants if he dies. While there is one more violent trophy tied to Marcus, it's chapter specific and I needed to do it for a magazine, so I'll get back to it later. With Connor as the sole playable character, the rest of this playthrough moved quickly. At Jericho, I confronted North and chose to remain a machine, though this was my only option at that point. Following this confrontation, Connor was killed by a soldier, which was the final death I needed for the I'll Be Back trophy. In the final chapter, North leads a revolution while Connor prepares to complete his mission. Setting up a sniper position, I encountered Captain Allen from the game's opening chapter. Instead of confronting them, I chose to jump off the roof. However, Connor's story wasn't quite over. After North's failed attempt to free Deviants from a recall center, she fled into a nearby building. Connor now uploaded into yet another android body, tracked her down, and completed his mission by killing her. With my violent playthrough wrapped up, I turned my attention to the remaining chapter-specific trophies and collectibles. Starting with the Meet Kamsky chapter, I had Connor kill Chloe when the option was given. Afterward, I focused on finding the last few magazines I needed. The 3 I needed relied on specific choices: Marcus not pushing Leo, Kara and Alice avoiding the police, and Marcus choosing Revolution instead of Demonstration. The good thing about this is that I don't have to replay a lot of the game for these magazines. Just make the choices I mentioned and play the few chapters needed until I found the magazine. The first 2 were straightforward, and since I chose Revolution as Marcus, I would be knocking out 2 birds with 1 stone. This led to an action-heavy sequence where Marcus fights to free androids. This resulted in a final fight against Connor, which I thought was a pretty cool moment. Completing this chapter netted me the final magazine I needed, along with the trophy for leading a revolution. The last trophy was tied to Kara. She and Alice needed to escape the recycling center at the end of the game. Getting caught at Jericho earlier sent them there, which was an entirely new sequence I hadn't seen before. Everything was going smooth until I made a mistake toward the end when a drone caught me. Panicking, I quit to the main menu before seeing how things played out. But it was here when I realized I messed up even worse. See, something Detroit does when replaying chapters is giving you the option to save your choices or not. For whatever reason, I thought I was confident enough to get this done in one go, so I chose not to save my choices for some dumb reason. When I went to select the chapter and realized none of my previous choices had been saved, I was slightly frustrated by this. Still, replaying this section introduced me to even more choices I hadn't considered. Expediting the process by getting Marcus and Connor killed, I played through this section again. This time, we escaped the recycling center, giving me the last trophy and the platinum. Looking back, I started strong with Detroit Become Human. While a few trophies were mildly annoying, this list reminded me why I love trophy hunting in the first place. It pushed me to explore parts of the game I hadn't seen before and experience its world through an entirely new lens. The game's staggering number of choices constantly surprised me, with decisions playing out in ways I didn't expect. This was a great way to kick off my journey, setting the tone for the games ahead. Mad Max. I'll be completely honest with you guys, this was the game I dreaded revisiting the most. Don't get me wrong, I really like Mad Max. I first played it in 2017 during my junior year of high school when I was really sick and couldn't put it down for days. I played so much of it at the time, and I genuinely think it's one of the most underrated games of the last generation. With 36 trophies unlocked, this only left me with 14 more to collect. So why the dread? Simple. Collectibles. Now, normally I don't mind collectibles. I'll usually throw on a podcast, pull up a guide if I have to, and knock this out in a couple of sittings. But here it was overkill. The map is massive, and there are a staggering 227 scavenging locations that must be 100% completed. This meant collecting every piece of scrap, history relics, stronghold project parts, and scrap pallets at each location. When I first played, I only completed maybe a handful of these, so I knew I was in for a grind. I thought I could save this for last and focus on other trophies first, but I quickly realized I would need a lot of scrap for upgrades, so I decided to tackle all the scavenging locations first. I was slightly nervous because I read that scavenging locations wouldn't track for some, making the trophy unattainable, but I pushed forward and prayed for the best. Over my Thanksgiving break, I spent a couple of days going to every single scavenging location. By the end of this multi-day hunt, everything registered and I looted the final location, earning the trophy. With the project parts from scavenging, I built every project in all strongholds, something I thought I had done years ago.
I still see its luck.
Using the scrap I collected, I built the best V6 and V8 engines, and built all the available Archangels, which tied into other trophies I would tackle later. Next, I turned my attention to the camps. While I had destroyed them all in my original playthrough, I never completed the optional objectives in most of them. These objectives included looting even more scrap, finding history relics, and destroying Scrotus insignias. Compared to the scavenging grind, this wasn't too bad. Using a guide, I completed all the bonus objectives in a couple of hours. Even after all that, I was still missing one history relic. With all the scavenging locations and camps completed, I wasn't sure where it could be. After some searching, I discovered it was at a fast travel point and found it quickly. With the collectibles wrapped up, I focused on races, challenges, and a single miscellaneous trophy. For the latter, I just had to be airborne in a vehicle for 4 seconds and land without dying. The races came next, with multiple trophies tied to completing them in legendary time using each of the 16 Archangels. Initially, I didn't realize I only needed to use Archangels for these, and spent time doing races with other vehicles available, which is where I unlocked trophies for completing a time bomb death run and scatter death run. Once I caught on, things went much faster. Along the way, I defeated enemy vehicles with every Archangel, completed a death run with every Archangel, completed a death run in legendary time with each one, and completed at least one race at every death run location. Finally, I tackled the most daunting task, completing all non-repeating challenges. Let's go ahead and address the elephant in the room. This trophy is now unattainable after October 2020 when the online server shut down, rendering 2 challenges impossible to complete. Luckily, I had completed those years ago, so I could still earn the trophy today. The challenges I did have to complete were no cakewalk. Most were manageable as I worked on other trophies, but the car combat challenges were especially tedious. Some required defeating enemy vehicles with a specific Archangel, but for those I found a trick. I'd drive the target vehicle out of a stronghold, spawn my Archangel, and complete the challenge, which saved a lot of time. The last handful of challenges were particularly tough. A notable one required maintaining full cruising speed for 1.9 miles in the Righteous Spike Archangel. After watching videos and failing a few attempts, I realized the Archangel had to be built with no upgrades. With that adjustment, I finally got it. The final challenge involved defeating a vehicle in a sandstorm while driving the Aurelian the Ready Archangel. Since sandstorms rarely spawn, what I did was take an enemy vehicle to the area outside the map, known as the Big Nothing, and spawn the Archangel. Once inside, I could just simply blow it up. I actually did this challenge a few times, but every time I would exit the game, it wouldn't track for some reason. That's why I saved this for last, and once it was complete, the platinum was mine. After sinking countless hours into Mad Max, I wanted to tackle something shorter for my next platinum. That's when I decided to finish one of the indie games I had left unfinished, Maquette. I started this first-person puzzle game back in 2022 when I was on a bit of an indie kick. At the time, I unlocked 12 of the 23 trophies for completing each level and knocking out a few miscellaneous trophies. This time, the focus was on speedrun trophies. While I'm not usually a fan of these, I was up for the challenge. The times were tight, so I needed to know exactly what I was doing. To ease into it, I spent a random day refreshing myself on the controls. Starting with the first level, the gardens, I watched a speedrun video and struggled for a few tries until I realized I could skip the cutscenes, saving precious seconds. With that adjustment, I finished the level in under 3 minutes. When I picked the game back up after Mad Max, I was ready to dive into the next level, the Maquette. I first earned a miscellaneous trophy for creating an early exit by using a key to make a bridge over a wall. Afterward, I barely managed to complete the speedrun in under 4 minutes and 10 seconds.
There you are.
As I searched for more speedrun tips, I discovered videos by Cheetah's Guides, showcasing exploits to complete the levels even faster. Finding these broken ways to quickly finish these levels felt oddly rewarding. I've already experienced this game, so if it helped me get the platinum faster, I didn't see the harm in doing this. Plus, it was fascinating to see all the ways the game could be exploited. Using these exploits, I completed the gateways in under 4 minutes and 35 seconds, the wedge in under 9 minutes and 50 seconds, and the escape in under 4 minutes and 20 seconds. When it comes to the spiral, there wasn't a quicker method since it's fairly linear, so I had to play it normally. I stressed a bit, especially when a key wouldn't cooperate, but managed to finish in under 6 minutes and 40 seconds. For the final mission, the exchange, I returned to my ways and completed it in under 5 minutes and 25 seconds. With all the speedrun trophies out of the way, only a couple of miscellaneous trophies remained. In the gateways, I had to discover Max, Sandy, Sputnik, Balto, Kitsumi, Egbert, Miss Mayer, Momo, Rara, Dotsy, Pixel, Daisy, Houdini, Music, Luna, Prince, Quincy, Trouble, Jazz, Indy, Bill, Cleo, Kaini, and Pablo. This trophy wasn't as daunting as it sounded. The level uses colored gems to unlock different sections. I played through it normally until I reached the end. Instead of using the red gem to exit, I used the green gem to unlock the area I needed to finally discover this adorable pack of creatures. The last miscellaneous trophy involved entering the Arc Tower on my first try during the final mission. Essentially, I just had to get through the opening section within a certain time limit. I pulled it off on my first attempt, unlocking the trophy and the platinum for Maquette. The next game to platinum is Returnal, one of my favorite games of this console generation. This third-person roguelike shooter combines relentless fast-paced combat and comes with stunning visuals, stellar audio design, and possibly the best use of the DualSense controller. It was one of the first titles I picked up after getting my PS5, and I quickly fell in love with it. At the time, I had never played a roguelite, and this was possibly the best introduction to the genre. The game's difficulty was tough, but rewarding, and its gameplay ranks among the best I've ever experienced, solidifying its place as one of the standout titles of this generation. I initially played a lot of Returnal in 2021, and I even created a review for it on one of my old YouTube channels.
Returnal is the first roguelite that I have ever played, and it has been a very interesting experience.
It wasn't very good. This is one of those rare games I stuck with after finishing the story simply because the gameplay loop was that good. With 24 out of the 32 trophies unlocked, I've wanted to platinum this for a while, but one thing held me back. Wait for it. Collectibles. Again, I don't mind searching for collectibles, but Returnal makes the process far more tedious than it needs to be. Why? Because as a roguelite, the game's weapons, pickups, and biome layouts are randomly generated, and the RNG nature of the biome layouts makes tracking down collectibles, like glyphs and scout logs, a nightmare. It often took countless runs to find just one collectible. For this reason, I tackled Returnal sporadically while working on Detroit and Mad Max, usually doing a run or two each night. The game is divided into 2 acts, each with 3 biomes. In Act 1, you explore the Overgrown Ruins, Crimson Wastes, and Derelict Citadel. I collected all the Overgrown Ruins collectibles a few years ago, leaving me with the other 2. In these biomes, I only needed glyphs since I already had all the scout logs. At first, I would play through the entire area, but as I got down to the last 1 or 2 glyphs, I sped through them, skipping any enemy encounters that I could. The game's excellent use of activity cards helped me pinpoint the locations of the missing glyphs, and after multiple runs, I finally found the last one in the Derelict Citadel. Crimson Waste took a bit longer. The last glyph I needed was tied to one of the rarest room spawns in the game, located toward the end of the biome. Using a portal in the first area to skip to the final section, I spent a few nights running through the area repeatedly. On one run, just as I was about to call it a night, the elusive room just so happened to spawn. I collected the glyph and completed the Crimson Waste survey. Next, I moved on to the second set of biomes, Echoing Ruins, Fractured Wastes, and the Abyssal Scar. To my surprise, I collected pretty much everything in the first 2 biomes, missing only 1 scout log in each. The logs were tied to finishing Act 3, which I completely forgot about until I resumed this trophy hunt. To unlock the true ending of the game, I needed to collect 6 Sunface fragments, which became available after defeating the final boss for the first time. There's a fragment in each biome, and I had already collected 5. The last fragment I needed was in the Abyssal Scar, the game's final biome. This is also where I needed the most collectibles, so I was in a constant loop of looking for glyphs, scout logs, and the Sunface fragment. Another thing to mention is that this is easily the hardest biome in the game, with enemies throwing some deadly attacks my way. Over a few nights, I grinded through runs, collecting the remaining glyphs and scout logs. Death was a constant occurrence, and it became frustrating after a while, but I kept pushing. Finally, I found the area containing the last Sunface fragment and the final scout log, completing the survey for Abyssal Scar.
Stars under the abyss are siren songs. I choose to obey.
With all the fragments in hand, I returned to the house, a recurring location in the Overgrown and Echoing Ruins. You get to explore the house after collecting each fragment to piece together parts of the story. While I am still unsure what these sequences symbolize, I just rolled with it for the trophy. This is when I acquired a set of keys to a car, signaling the final task of Act 3, defeating Ophinian, the Abyssal Scar boss, a second time. I knew this fight would be tough, so I prepared by scouring the biomes for pickups, upgrading my health and weapon proficiency, and looking for my favorite weapons. As I went through these biomes, I completed the surveys for Echoing Ruins,
I cannot atone.
and Fractured Wastes.
There were 9 floors in Gehenna.
Despite going into the fight with 2 malfunctions and less health than I wanted, the portals from the Hollow Seeker came in clutch. The battle was surprisingly quick, and I defeated Ophinian with relative ease. Using the keys, I accessed the car, triggering one final cutscene that revealed the true ending of the game. The credits rolled one last time, marking the official end of Act 3, and unlocking the long-awaited platinum for Returnal. Of all the games in this video, this platinum was the most satisfying. After working on it for years, I couldn't help but feel a huge sense of accomplishment in finally completing one of my favorite games of the last few years. Next, we have Until Dawn. This might seem like a stretch, but Until Dawn is the first horror game I ever played. If you've seen my Alien Isolation video, you'll know that horror games aren't typically my thing, even now. That said, there are certain horror games I am open to try. Back in 2016, Until Dawn caught my eye during a sale, and while hesitant, I decided to give it a shot, playing through it over a summer weekend. As my first horror game, I was hooked. Featuring actors I recognized, an engaging story, and incredible graphics that arguably still hold up today, I became obsessed with Until Dawn for a couple of weeks. I might have even been slightly obsessed with Sam's actress, Hayden Panettiere. Given how much I enjoyed the game back then, revisiting it for the platinum felt like a no-brainer when I saw it sitting on my trophy list. Only 9 of the 19 trophies were unlocked from my first playthrough, all of which came from the story. For this playthrough, I needed to clean up the remaining collectibles and make a few story choices to ensure no one survived Until Dawn. Most of these choices don't come into play until episode 6, but some of the collectibles I needed were scattered throughout the earlier episodes, so I started from the beginning. Armed with the guide from PowerPix, I got to work. From the get-go, I was blown away by how smooth Until Dawn felt on the PS5. The PS4 version runs at 60 frames per second on newer hardware, completely elevating the experience. I even double-checked to ensure I was playing the PS4 version. It felt that good. Getting into the game, after witnessing the tragic deaths of Hannah and Beth, the story got underway. After a couple of episodes, it didn't take long to earn my first collectible trophy. As Matt, I found Beth's phone, completing the twins' clue line. In episode 6, the real carnage began. Matt was the first to go, falling victim to a Wendigo in the mines. As Ashley and Chris looked for Sam, who escaped a mysterious psycho earlier, they end up becoming his next targets again. Chris was given a gun, forced to choose between sacrificing himself or killing Ashley. I had to kill Ashley for a trophy, so I didn't hesitate at all.
Oh God, no!
Switching to Sam, I collected the remaining Mystery Man clues, all conveniently located in this one room. Reuniting with Mike, we headed back to the lodge, where Josh, Beth and Hannah's brother, revealed himself as the Psycho. The rest of the crew wasn't thrilled and tied him up in the barn. Meanwhile, Emily found herself in the mines. After encountering the Flamethrower Man, she manages to escape, only to run into a Wendigo. During a chase sequence, I failed a few QTEs to ensure Emily was bitten before escaping. Reuniting with everyone at the lodge, the strange man finds us and informs everyone on what's happening in the mountains. Chris and the stranger look for Josh, but when they find he's gone, the Wendigo comes after them. However, since I chose to shoot Ashley earlier, she left Chris outside where he was killed by the Wendigo. Now, a trophy should have popped here, and I was confused, but I just kept playing and waited to see what would happen. The rest of the crew make their way to the basement. Discovering Emily's bite, the group argued over what to do about her since she has become a liability. For another trophy, I chose to shoot Emily, again, with no hesitation. Just like before, a trophy should have popped, and I really started to get nervous, but kept playing, hoping they would pop at some point during the episode. As Ashley, I found this notebook that gave me the last clue I needed for the 1952 clue line. Here she discovered that the bites aren't infectious, which is when those trophies for killing Emily and Chris finally popped.
Shit. We've got to get to Mike. Like now.
Making my way through the rest of the story, the only collectible trophy I needed was for finding all the totems. I found all but one, somehow missing a totem during episode 4. By the time I realized this, I was already locked into the final moments of the game, so I just came back when everything was done. By episode 9, the only survivors were Sam, Mike, Ashley, Josh, and Jessica, who was taken earlier in the story. Looking for Mike in the sewers, Ashley was separated from Sam. When given the option to rejoin the group or investigate a mysterious voice, I chose to investigate, resulting in Ashley's death. Jessica met her end during a chase in the mines, while Josh was doomed regardless of my choices. That only left Sam and Mike, who made their way back to the lodge, now overrun by Wendigos.
Don't fucking move, Amos.
As they come up with a plan, I intentionally fail Sam's don't move sequence, leaving Mike as the lone survivor. He set the lodge ablaze, but was killed in the explosion.
Huh? Huh? How's that for you, fuck?
After a long night, no one survived until dawn.
I'm seeing something.
Only 2 trophies remained until the platinum. The first was for finding that missing totem in episode 4. Replaying the chapter, I finally grabbed it as Chris. Finally, Sam needed to immediately flick the switch at the end to destroy the lodge. I played through episode 10 again, and when the moment came, I had her do it, triggering the final cutscene and earning me the platinum. Before tackling the last game in this video, I want to highlight a couple of bonus games. Initially, I didn't plan to include these for very different reasons, but as I was working through the other games, I figured, why not? Long before this video was even a concept, I decided to replay Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice to prepare for its sequel. A few years ago, I wasn't in the best headspace. After sinking 100 hours into Cyberpunk 2077, a game that got me through a tough time, I decided to take a break from larger titles and focus on smaller indie games. One of those was Hellblade. My dad actually played it before I did and recommended it to me, and I'm so glad he did. I was captivated by the experience, completing the story in just a few days. However, like many players, I was missing one trophy for collecting all the lore stones. This time around, I started fresh, using a guide to track down the ones I had previously missed. This gave me the trophy along with the platinum for Hellblade.
She should have known.
Sigurd learns that Brynhild had once disobeyed Odin, and so he had her punished, stuck her.
Going into this, LEGO Marvel Superheroes wasn't on my radar to revisit. That said, I have a lot of nostalgia for it. It was one of the first games I got for my PS4, and I played it endlessly. I could have earned 100% completion at the time, but as a 13-year-old with no money, I sold it after finishing the game. A couple of years ago, I bought it digitally, but for some reason, it didn't recognize my old save. While working on Shadow of Mordor a few months back, I stumbled across it and thought, why not load this on my PS5 again and see what happens? To my surprise, it worked, and I was able to pick up from my 89.9% save file. Starting things up, I had 41 out of 46 trophies unlocked. Replaying the levels I needed in free play, I collected the remaining mini-kits I was missing. Heading into the open world, I found the few remaining gold bricks and Stan Lee's as well.
I have no idea how that happened. Thanks, true believers.
With Stan Lee unlocked, I earned a trophy for turning into Stan Hulk, followed by another for performing all the big LEGO figure transformations. At 99.8%, I was missing a character and vehicle, which got really complicated when I was looking for them, but it didn't take too long to find them. However, I was now sitting at 99.9% completion. I was a little stumped, and after diving down a deep rabbit hole, I ended up replaying a circus mission in the open world, hoping it would fix the issue. I completed it, and to my relief, the final trophy popped, earning me the long-awaited platinum. For the final platinum I earned in 2024, we have Elden Ring. This game honestly needs no introduction. Taking things back to 2021, however, I didn't pick this game up when it first released, despite it taking the gaming world by storm. For months, I couldn't escape the Elden Ring hype. My dad, who got the game on day one and became hooked, despite not being a Souls player, was actually the one who convinced me to try it. I picked it up during a Black Friday sale that year, and I eventually got hooked too. I had dabbled in Souls games before, but never got fully into them. The open world nature of Elden Ring, where I could tackle things in my own way, was daunting, but also incredibly appealing. Over the years, I played sporadically, during Christmas breaks, summer vacations, or random moments when I felt drawn back in. Over the summer when the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC came out, I wanted to finally get the platinum. I made it all the way to the final boss, but after getting my ass kicked repeatedly, it ended up in my backlog yet again. With only a few bosses left, some legendary items to collect, and 3 endings to complete, I knew it was finally time to earn the platinum for one of the best games of the generation. Starting with the bosses, they were mostly manageable at my current level. The Valiant Gargoyles, Regal Ancestor Spirit, and Lich Dragon Vortisax went down without too much trouble. Then came Dragon Lord Placidusix. This towering dragon was relentless, with devastating attacks that could one-shot me if I wasn't careful. But the worst part of this fight? The run back to the boss. So freaking annoying. After a couple of days, I eventually locked in to take this dragon down. Next up was Shardbearer Rykard. To access him, I had to follow a quest line at Volcano Manor. I hadn't realized or remembered that I could complete assassinations from the manor. Once they were complete, I was invited to meet the Lord of the Manor, triggering a boss fight. I struggled at first until I realized the weapon that was off to the side could be used to easily defeat him. After some upgrades and using my Mimic Tear during the fight, Rykard didn't stand a chance. From there, I shifted my focus to the legendary items. First up, the legendary armaments. This is one of the few missable trophies in the game, depending on your progress. The Bolt of Grandsax could potentially become unavailable after burning the Erdtree. However, I was still able to unlock it afterwards as I found it during my boss fight with Godfrey. I don't know if I did something different or if this was patched, but with the Bolt in my possession, I didn't have to go back through New Game Plus to get these weapons. After defeating Rykard, I headed to Farum Azula, where Knight Bernal invaded my world. He was tougher than I expected, but defeating him earned me the Devourer Scepter. My final armament came from a cave in Ordina, where I defeated a misbegotten enemy to claim the Golden Order Great Sword. I followed a similar process for the legendary talismans, ashen remains, and sorceries and incantations. Some were straightforward, requiring only a boss fight or traveling down an obscure path, while others, especially the sorceries, were tricky to track down. But after a few hours, I had everything I needed. With the legendary items collected, I turned my attention to the final remaining optional bosses, Godskin Noble and Mohg the Omen, both of which were surprisingly easy at my level. There is an additional room that becomes available after defeating Mohg, but it ties into one of the game's endings, so I'll be returning here later. Finally, it was time for Radagon and the Elden Beast. Radagon has always been easy for me to defeat when I locked in, but the Elden Beast, not so much. I could dodge most of its attacks and whittle down half of its health on a good run, but a few devastating moves repeatedly took me down. After an hour and a half, I was about to call it a night, but I told myself, one more try. That last attempt was all I needed, and I finally defeated the Elden Beast.
Let's go. Let's freaking go, man. Yes.
Now for the 3 endings. To prevent myself from doing multiple playthroughs, I backed my save file to the cloud. I was a little nervous because I rarely back up my saves this way. I usually prefer to back them up to a USB drive, but this worked out without a hitch. My first ending was the Age of Stars, which required completing Ronnie's questline. I completed it at some point during my playthrough for a plethora of other things, so she took the Tarnished as her Elden Lord. Next was the Lord of the Frenzied Flame ending. Traveling back to the secret location I mentioned previously, I received the flame in a pretty cool cutscene, becoming the Lord of the Frenzied Flame. Finally, I mended the Elden Ring itself to become the Elden Lord, unlocking the final trophy, and earning the Platinum Trophy. What a journey this has been. It was such a rewarding experience coming back to truly finish 8 amazing video games. While a few games took longer than expected, this project was the perfect way to cap off what was already a wild year. I have plenty more games I would love to revisit, so if you're interested in another video, please show this one some love. Like, comment, share, whatever you can do to let me know you enjoyed it. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you next time.